Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and no guest today. I'm by myself, but a really important topic that all of you should be considering. So before we get started on this topic, let me send you over to AIAuthorAcademy.com. We are redoing the course we did back in April that is AI platform building. We have a system down that is very streamlined and uses AI to do a lot of the things that you would normally do by hand, which makes it so much easier and very easy to automate as well. So it's AIAuthorAcademy.com. With that, you'll get 4 group lessons. We have 4 weeks, once a week, we have a group meeting, and then we break off and you get a 1 hour each week time slot with me to work on your own stuff. Because I realize, from my own teaching experience that it's really easy to take the information in, but sometimes you need a little help executing. So I invite you to go over and sign up for that course and join us. It's all this month in September. So with that said, September is when you as an entrepreneur or author should start thinking about, what am I going to do in the new year? If you're thinking about writing a book, this is the time to get started on that platform, because there's so much involved with it. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is really strategically starting to plan that platform. So one of the things that starts out a platform is, what is your message going to be? But it's not just the message about your book. It's also, remember, we've talked about very many times in the past, that there's also that component of, I'm not going to get a ton of ROI directly from that book. So what is it I'm going to sell next? And so when you target your messaging, you need to look not only at that book, but at those big ticket items that will be the result of someone reading the book. So all of that messaging not only has to be formulated, but it needs to be in alignment. You can't have a book about one thing and be selling another thing that's completely unrelated. We had that happen with an entrepreneur about 2 years ago. She got a lot of feedback at the last minute about something she posted about her book, and people walked away. And part of that also was because the audience she had been tendering for the book was a little bit different than the audience and campaigns she'd been doing running up to the book. So there wasn't a lot of alignment, and it really became a problem for her to be able to sell both. So the messaging is what's going to go into your content, because content really is where you need to start looking next. Is, I have my brand, I have my messaging, and now what am I going to produce as content? Content is not only a trust builder, but it's also that experimental. How are people responding to my messaging? Are they liking it? Are they not liking it? If they're not liking it, then that messaging needs to be tweaked a little. So this is a really important point, because if you go through and you just slam it through and people aren't resonating with it, then probably the same thing's going to happen with the book and the high ticket course as well. So one of the things that happens with people in marketing is they think that my message is there, it's good, everything's going to work. The reality is, marketing is just a guess until it's not. And I think any entrepreneur who's been out there for a while knows that, because they go out and they have this big idea, but then that big idea requires tweaking along the way until they get the ingredients right. I know that happened with me. It took a good 2 years to get that messaging where it really resonated with people in that. So it's not only important to have that messaging in place, but the funnel is that next step too. How are you going to bring people into your list? How are you going to bring people and get more followers over on social media? All of this is a result of messaging and you getting yourself out there. Now, how do you tell what needs to be done? How do you tell if it's working or not? Well, in order to do that, you need to start with a baseline. So preparing those KPIs, that those key in your campaign, the key performance indicators, will help you understand that baseline where you started, and then having that goal where you want to be. And then realistically watching those followers and that email list grow. So there's going to be some trial and error there. You have to get people off of social media and into your list, because as we've seen several times, those the social media platforms can go away, or something can happen, an algorithm changes, and you may lose visibility of those people. So it's very important to have those key indicators there and also be able to track your progress. If you don't do that, you're not going to know what's working and what's not. And that's what is so important about this, is if you have a message and it doesn't seem to be getting across, you might have to tweak it. A lot of times with funnels, somebody will bring me a funnel and it'll be like, just like, let's start all over. You can reverse engineer and look at those numbers and sort of see where that glitch is in your funnel a lot of times. So you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the only way that you can tell the reverse engineering and what's working is if you keep those optimization points in there, if you keep everything in an analytic format so you can see, oh, did I just have a massive deletion on my email list? Now, I had that back at the very beginning. I pushed something for an author of mine that was 6 figures in 6 months. All of my audience knows that this is a long-term strategy. So I actually had over 20 people in one day unsubscribe. And I think it was because it was just really out of alignment with my message. So those are the things that you really have to look at, because whatever you're putting out there, whether it's a content item, whether it is a social media post, you want to be able to see how are those performing. I will tell you, I had a podcast about a year and a half ago on piracy. That thing still gets comments. It still gets views. And it's because it was something that was very unique, that other people weren't talking about, that really resonated with people, especially the person who had their book stolen, who tried to find out if I could help her a couple months back, which I couldn't. She hadn't copyrighted the book. Nothing could happen. So it really is important that you look at those analytics. Now, why am I telling you about analytics? Because that's the one thing that none of you like to do. I don't like to do it. I hate numbers, even though I have to run numbers all the time to have a business. It's just one more number I have to look at. But the whole point of it is if you're not willing to look at those analytics and you're not really willing to get realistic about those numbers that are happening, you're going to have a lot of problems along the way with growth and your message. And if you're going to write an entire book and put together those programs, you better know that that messaging is working first, that that's what your people really want and are looking for. And I know that sounds so basic, but you'd be surprised how many times I'm brought a book and we don't know. Like, they haven't done any of this work. They haven't built a platform. So we have no idea if they just spent all this money on an entire book and time writing the book, in addition to now spending money on a publishing package. And most of them don't have that next step, that big ticket item. Remember, the ROI from your book is not usually direct. What you drop on that publishing package is probably not going to come to fruition until you sell those big ticket programs. So that's why all the way through building, this all has to be in alignment. So you have to make those adjustments. You have to be able to optimize, and you have to be able to know that your message is resonating. So some key indicators that maybe you can try to work from. So first of all, how much is your list growing? List building is harder than people understand. So if you can set that first goal of, I want 500 people, I believe at 500, that's where most of the mail server platforms begin to charge you. So how can you maximize that? And what does your growth look like in those initial stages? Also, social media. Where did you start out at? When I started out, I had a contest in 2020 with my coach about how many bookings, speaking bookings, I could get in that 1 year. And I got up to almost 100 in that 1 year. But what I didn't mention was I went from about 9,000 people on LinkedIn to almost 15,000 to almost 15,000. I think I'm almost up to 17 now, but I haven't been as intentional about my growth than I was back then. But that growth from LinkedIn resulted in me getting almost those 100 speaking gigs, because I intentionally went out and I connected with people who could give me that visibility. So it is all interconnected, but it's also how can you grow that audience, look at those key indicators, and then also grow the list, test your message, because you definitely want to do that too. So that's where the content comes in, is you've got all your baseline numbers. Now you start putting out that weekly LinkedIn newsletter, or you start posting 5 days a week. Testing video are my videos getting more looks at than my written. So really looking at, what does this look like? And what does that look like? Which is better? Can I do both? Or do I go with one or the other? So all of that is really essential before you start dropping major money into that publishing package and into creating those courses. So I want to leave you with that today. We have our planning course coming up again in November. If that's something that might interest you, reach out to me, chatwithjuliette.com, get on my calendar and talk to me about it, because we truly do show you a way to set those goals, break them down into yearly, quarterly, monthly, and even weekly sometimes. And when you're analyzing all of your platform, you need to be doing it on at least a monthly basis. A weekly basis would be better because you'd catch things that were falling through the cracks sooner. But getting all of that together is really important. If you're thinking about writing that book in 2025, you need to not only start getting that set up, budgeting for it as well, because you're going to need help to get traction on it. I don't know many people who were able to do it on their own and get really effective results. So that's where you start budgeting. And when you start budgeting to get that set up, using it, getting familiar, doing your optimization, by the time you get to your publishing package and your book developer as well, you're already going to have solid messaging in place that will help you sell more books. All right, you guys, thanks. I know it's short and sweet today, but it's just me. So have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. If you're in the United States, this is coming out over the holiday weekend. I know everybody's getting ready to go back to school. Fall's here. It's a really fun time. So have a wonderful weekend. Thanks.